Episode 170 for March 24th, 2026. Take two. We were streaming on a different stream on YouTube. If you're confused what happened there, if you're on Spotify, this doesn't matter. We're just redoing the intro. Yes, apologies for the mix-up there. Anyway, as I was saying, we have a loaded show today. Best non-con games. We're taking a break from the biggest news in college while we're doing the best non-con games. We have Auburn Reasonable Expectations to cover, College Bowl Historical What If. So that series is continuing along with the Reasonable Expectations segment. All that for you. Of course, this is a normal week again. Last week was a little bit different because of the schedule. This week, normal week. So we'll have the show today as we're live on YouTube, correct on the actual real stream, and along with Spotify, recorded on Spotify, but also we should be doing an extra pod tomorrow and on Friday, I believe. So we'll have two extra pods this week, I believe. For sure, one, two, we'll see. But definitely two shows this week, two extra pods. But again, like I mentioned on the original stream, we're just doing like a few minutes ago on the wrong one. We have a situation with my apartment when they do the yearly emergency system check. So because of that, the schedule was supposed to be this week, and then it got moved around. We moved in the coming weeks or so, whether it's next week or the week after, the scheduling will get very weird. So we have to do some like nightly shows probably, but that's okay. We can deal with that. So again, we have the extra pods coming out, and we have the normal schedule this week. Going forward, at least for the foreseeable future, a bit iffy on the time, so we should be somewhat back normal after that. But this week should be normal. So again, apologies for the stream mix-up. We did the stream from like 2 weeks ago, or last week. Now we're back on the current one. Hopefully that actually saved. I don't think it actually, yeah, it did. It saved the old one, but the new one, we'll take care of that. But yeah, so apologies there. Again, we're using Restream instead of StreamYard, because I was not a fan of StreamYard. Restream's a lot better quality. It's just, we got confused the link there on YouTube. For Spotify, this is just me just going on the whole tangent. Doesn't matter. All right, let's get into the show here. Put some water real quick and we'll begin. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on Spotify and on the other stream we're not supposed to be on, of course, we're high atop a cloudy Jacksonville, Florida. Again, we have the front moving in. It's cold. It's not cold, but it's cooler out. Cloudy. We were near 90 like yesterday and Sunday. Very warm. But we should be back there later this week, and we'll go back down to somewhat cooler temperatures. So it won't be too bad, but we'll be hot again Friday. Anyway. College football best non-con games. We haven't done this yet. I don't believe we've been through the schedules. Okay, we've done the whole schedule, kind of early thoughts, but we haven't done like a full breakdown of the best non-con games, right? We'll eventually do think the conference games for each conference. We'll do like probably 5 for each, but we'll do the non-con here first and move on to that eventually. First one up here. Well, the first two are probably the most obvious ones, and the rest of them are like less obvious, but we'll cover all the big ones. So. First up here, Ohio State, Texas. Could, much like last year, be 1 versus 2, an early season game of the century. Unlike last year, of course, this will be, it's an SEC territory. The SEC team is the home team. This should be the 7:30 kickoff on ABC, so this will be a night game, but not at, unfortunately, it'll be Ohio State having to go on the road to a night environment. The last time Ohio State, to my recollection, going on the road to a very, very hostile environment, I believe, and trying to remember here if this is actually true or not. I'm trying to think here. Okay, so the Oregon non-con game in 2020 was canceled, so that didn't happen the last game. Okay, so I believe the last time Ohio State had a big non-conference game on the road, I believe, and I'm bringing this off my head here, the old noggin here, I believe was 2016, I believe. Yeah, 2016 on the road at Oklahoma. In 2016, I was freshman year of high school. That was 10 years ago. Last time they were on the road for a big non-conference game. Not the year before, I believe, was Virginia Tech, I believe. That was like the Labor Day game. So the year after, they went on the road, beat Oklahoma after OU lost to Houston on the neutral site game. So I believe that was the last time they had a neutral site or a non-neutral site game on the road for the first game of the year, or the big non-con game. I believe. I know they had that neutral site game in 2018 against Texas Christian, but that was neutral site. That was, again, the last time a true non-conference game on the road was Oklahoma in 2016. I believe that was correct, and they won that game. So this will be the first time since. Ironically, it's against a former Big 12 team, the other rival of the OU Texas rivalry, Texas, on the road. So again, potentially 1 versus 2. You have Quinn Ewers not Quinn Ewers, he's in the NFL now. Arch Manning. You have Texas loading up on the portal, stacking up recruiting classes. This should be probably the best Texas team, Sark has said, at least offensively, since he has been there. Ohio State brings back a whole lot. A lot of experience coming back. A lot of new coordinators, though, with Mr. Arthur Smith coming in from the NFL. But largely, besides the offensive coordinator change and some big pieces leaving on defense, but I mean, look, it's Ohio State. I'm not too concerned about potential replacements for those players like Caleb Downs and friends. They should be fine there. I'm not concerned about that. I do believe this should be, of course, the premier non-conference game in college football. Without a doubt. And I believe this is not going to be week 1. This is going to be week 3, I believe, week 2. I believe it's week 2. I believe OU, Michigan is week 3. So this game absolutely has to be on top of that list. Just from a brand standpoint, with the 2 biggest brands in college football, absolute cinema, hopefully. I know the last game didn't live up to the 1 versus 2 potential, situation there. Even though it wasn't officially that, I believe this game should be 1 versus 2 game of the century, even though it's kind of weird how people say game of the century. What does that even mean? But this being a 1 versus 2 and adding this game to the Wikipedia page for 1 versus 2 matchups in the regular season, yes, I do believe this will be that, unlike last year, which was 1 versus 3. So, yes, this should be a huge game, of course. I mean, just brands alone, yes, this is a monster game. It should be an instant classic, hopefully. Of course, we'll break that game down the road. Now, I'm trying to think here, does FanDuel have the numbers here for the big non-conference games? I think they do. Let me check here. Yes, they do. How about that? Let me see here. Ohio State, Michigan, or not Ohio State, Michigan. Let's leave it down the road. Texas, Ohio State. 2.5 favored Texas. I'm not surprised here. Okay, good. Cool. I totally forgot FanDuel had these up there. Now, FanDuel's not a sponsor of the show, but they were just a good asset we use for research purposes. So let me move the tab over here so a bit closer to our notes. Okay, so we covered Ohio State, Texas. Michigan hosting Oklahoma. Probably will be the big noon kickoff for that week. So unfortunately, as you're, given the way the TV contracts are for the Big Ten, this game will more likely be a big noon kickoff. Nothing against big noon kickoff, the folks there, like Gus Johnson, Joel, and Jenny Taft, but the fact that, look, if you're an Ohio State fan, you're a Michigan fan, I understand that you are very much so always going to get these noon kickoffs and you're never going to get the NBC second slot at night. I get that. That's very frustrating. I think a lot of these places like Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State would love to have these games at night, but unfortunately, you can't really do that. So yeah, this one definitely would be a big noon kickoff if it's not been confirmed yet. Looks like no time. Actually, hold on a minute. Is there a time? Or both of these? Because on FanDuel, they have both of these at noon. I don't think that's correct though. Yeah, that must be just an error. Because I don't think any times have been added to these games. Because on FanDuel, it has these as September 12th both. Okay, so they're both on the same weekend. I didn't realize that. That they are, that's week 2. Yes, they both these are week 2. Not a mistake, but have them both at noon. That makes no sense. The Texas-Ohio State game definitely won't be at noon. The Michigan-Oklahoma game definitely will be at noon. The Ohio State-Texas game definitely won't be at noon. That should be a 7:30 kickoff. But, yeah, Michigan and Oklahoma, much like the Texas game, the home team is favored by 2.5. No surprise there. So, again, much like the Texas-Oklahoma, Texas-Oklahoma, man, getting confused here. Texas-Ohio State game, big brand helmet game here, right? Last year's game, you had OU who couldn't really run the football. You had John Mateer doing crazy stuff. Michigan just offensively, just like poop offense, pretty much. New coaching staff there now with Cal Whittingham, new offense, second year of Bryce Underwood, a new staff there. Hoping for improvement there with the offense. Hopefully they can score more than 9 points or whatever they scored last year. I think OU, there will be a challenge defensively, and they should be they're hoping for a top 5 defense. That's not a guarantee, but they should. Look, if Brent Venables being the chief engineer of that, they should, right? Offensively, though, there's some questions right now. Look, you're getting a John Mateer back healthy after basically a full year of recovery, play full spring and summer. You'll have another year under the system being installed there. You have some new receivers coming in. So both of these teams should be a little bit better than last year. So level up, right? So hopefully we should get more of a classic game. It wasn't very competitive last year. But hopefully, again, just from the standpoint that it's a new coaching staff in Michigan, very experienced, though. It's not like a new, like a former G5 guy coming in, taking his first-time big job. No, I mean, Colin Willingham, he is as experienced as any head coach in college football, right? So yeah, Michigan first in a first big game. There you have OU traveling, and of course this will be Michigan's revenge game, right? They'll be looking for revenge, much like Texas is. So both of those two, obviously, you're 1-2 for the biggest non-con game. Next one, Miami at Notre Dame. This was a classic last year. It was in South Florida. I think it was raining that game too. It was a typical Florida afternoon and late summer, pretty much. This game, though, different, totally different in terms of the weather situation. I mean, you're going from hot, stormy temperatures of South Florida to like 55-degree weather in November. Again, much like the other teams we just mentioned, a good helmet game. It's also a big rivalry, convicts versus Catholics, right? It's a classic rivalry. A lot of I just got some breaking news here. We'll touch on that here in a minute. It involves Tampa, and it's not surprising, but we'll get on to that with a live breaking news, Madam Scheffner. But anyway, what I was just saying here, Miami Notre Dame classic rivalry again. Unlike last time, this will be played up north, be in November. So you can just picture it, right? I mean, it's like 55 degrees, chilly, maybe it's cloudy and whatnot. Beautiful scenery up there in South Bend, even though I've never been there before. I've seen it on TV. Television probably doesn't do it justice, right? You have Miami with new quarterback Mensa coming in from Duke. And you have still a lot of decent talent there, even though they've lost a lot. And again, sort of like Ohio, like totally like Ohio State, but in a lot of ways, Miami has gotten to that point where, with Mario Cristobal, even at Oregon, he was there a few years ago. Recruiting is never the issue there. The issue is the clock management and the stupid decisions. I will say that is a problem. But the recruiting side of things, the talent, that's not the issue here. I mean, you have new quarterback coming in, Notre Dame. I think a lot of folks will probably have them preseason top 5, I would imagine. At least I will have them preseason top 5. Probably. I don't think they're going to be one. I don't think there'll be a 1 or 2. They'll probably be like 3, probably in the AP and coaches pool in the preseason. But anyway, again, major game there should have major CFB implications. But again, even besides all that, it's a rivalry game. It's at Notre Dame after last year. Both of these teams are going to be very, 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 very good, I think, next year. And they're very, very high quality teams. A lot of Marcus Freeman, he's building up there. Yeah, Mario Cristobal. A warm weather team, by the way, again, traveling to a cold weather environment. Never a good thing. So that's even more fuel to Notre Dame wanting to get some revenge there. And this is one of their big games, right? And there's another one we'll talk about later that no one besides Josh Pate's talking about. But this is basically one of their big games, right? After they lost the USC game, which is a travesty. Of course, if you don't know, yes, that USC Notre Dame rivalry is on pause now for stupid reasons. But so this one of the game later on are Notre Dame's 2 big games because the rest of their schedule is very manageable. Next up here, and this one, UNC Texas Christian and West Virginia and Virginia. These are sort of the only games that are neutral site that we'll allow on here. I'm not a big fan of neutral site games, but they exist and we have to talk about them. Baylor and Auburn. This should have been a home game for Auburn. It was going to be a home game for Auburn, but unfortunately, because of the deep state of college football, this game moved from Auburn, Alabama, to down Interstate 85 to Atlanta, Georgia. Against Atlanta, Georgia, been there multiple times, whether it's going through the airport or visiting the city. Nothing against the city of Atlanta. Okay, it's just that I would prefer this to be on the college campus. That sounds unpopular, but whatever. Baylor, Auburn. A very weird dynamic here. So you have a new new staff and basically a new roster at Auburn, right? You lose talent, you bring talent in. You have Alex Golesh there. You have Byron Brown. Yes, I know a lot of folks are making a big deal about his throwing motion. He really gives a shit. I don't. I usually cuss him a show there, but there we go. I don't care. Okay, is what I'm trying to say. I don't really care. So you have the new coaching staff at Auburn with Alex Golesh. First big game of the year. It's a neutral site, and they have Baylor and Dave Aranda in this situation. Could have been fired last year because of the whole administration changes there at Baylor over there in Waco. They couldn't, or at least they didn't have the ability to fire him. So they're basically stuck with him for another year, more than likely. And on top of that, another weird storyline. Guess who their starting quarterback probably will be? And that's not confirmed yet, but I think the idea is that he will be the starter. You guys know who it is? Well, it's not the guy from last year. He's on the, I think he's going to the NFL draft. It's DJ Lagway. That's right. The Florida's old quarterback, the former 5-star. Everyone was saying he'll be the next Cam Newton, right? Same with Bryce Herndon. No, I think Bryce has more potential. I'm not saying he will be like Cam, but he has more potential to be really, really good. At least more immediate potential. Though with Bryce Herndon, with DJ Lagway, though, disappointed. Now, doesn't mean it'll always be like that. Who knows? Maybe him going to Baylor, new coaching staff, new atmosphere. Maybe it was just time to get away, get a fresh start. I mean, you're going against an SEC program. Granted, you haven't faced them before, but it's SEC level talent for the most part. Though it's a little bit of G5 mixed in. Against a new coaching staff versus an experienced coaching staff. Baylor, of course, looking for revenge after what happened last year. Here's the thing for Auburn, and I'll probably say this again once the game gets closer when we get to around August. This whole situation at Baylor, this whole Baylor series, if you will, it's a very weird dynamic here. Not to mention with the whole neutral site changeover. This game, to me, if you're an Auburn fan or if you're the Auburn coaching staff there, you have to understand that this Baylor game cannot be like the Cal game a couple years ago. Ironically, or not ironically, but interestingly, of course, that was Fernando Mendoza, probably the first time any of you heard of him. Of course, he wins the Heisman, wins the national championship at Indiana last year. But before that, he beat Auburn. That was like the only thing he was notable for, was going on the road and taking Cal and beating Auburn. So that Cal game a couple years ago, of course, that was Hugh Freeze's second year. This, to me, I fear this could be that game for Auburn. It could be the Cal game at home all over again, where you're the favorite. I believe they are the favorite. Let me check FanDuel. The FanDuel odds. I believe Auburn is the favorite. Yeah, 7.5. It's a big number, even for a neutral site. So much like the Cal game a couple years ago, you're 7.5-point favorite. You have a lot of hubris. There goes the border today. Hubris built up. Much like the Cal game, again, you're like very confident and whatnot. And much like Cal, Baylor can pop you. They could absolutely do it with DJ Lagway quarterback. And again, I know a lot of folks were shitting on him and saying that he's a trashy quarterback and he's, won't be anything meaningful. You don't know that. No one knows that for sure at all. I mean, look again, go back to that Cal game a couple years ago for Auburn at home. Fernando Mendoza goes in there and lights you up. Granted, some of that was your own fault because you turned the ball over like 4 times. So if you're Auburn and Alex Golesh, do not let this game become the Cal game from a couple years ago. Or at least the Cal home and away series, right? It's very similar, right? Auburn, very similar. He goes on the road and beats Cal much like they beat Baylor last year. Albeit the Cal game is more closer than the latter. But much like, it's a series, right? So you have the return game. And then Cal beats you at home, and, it's a possibility that Baylor could beat you, technically a home game, but it's a neutral site. So, again, don't let this game be the Cal game for a couple years ago. If you're Auburn, you got to be aware of that. Okay, you should be able to handle business here. Baylor, after their quarterback with DJ Lagway, against a very fragile program, based on your talent, even with the losing of guys like Cam Coleman and a lot of your receivers from last year's roster, you should probably match up pretty well with Baylor. Given, again, you run a very unique offense. I mean, ironically, it's the offense that Baylor used to run with our Bryles, but, again, just don't let this be the Cal game from a couple years ago. I think this team's better, especially at quarterback, but you never know. This next one, Clemson LSU. Isn't it crazy that we've gone to the point where the Clemson LSU game is all the way down the list of major non-conference games in college football? Imagine telling yourself that 10 years ago. Go back to 2016, right? Like, if you're to say, hey, 10 years from now, in 2026, Clemson and LSU will be playing each other. It's in Death Valley, the one in Louisiana. But it won't be the first one, the first non-conference game you'll bring up. You'll yourself 10 years ago. That's crazy. Clemson and LSU are like the two premier brands in college football right now. Well, not anymore. Well, for Clemson, for LSU, looks like for Auburn and Michigan, first big game for Lane Kiffin at LSU. It's a home game. I believe this should be the 7:30 kickoff on ABC, more than likely. With Fowler and Herbstreit being there, probably College Game Day will probably be there. This is a pretty significant game. Even though it doesn't feel like it because of the luster, because of what's happened to Clemson over the past couple of years, and even what's happened to LSU recently. But here's the fact, though, with LSU, that's the first game of the Lane Kiffin era, right? You don't know what it looks like yet. Now we know what Lane Kiffin looks like with the SEC roster and a program that was at Ole Miss. This is at LSU. And this is the first big job he's had, Lane Kiffin, he's had since the USC job many moons ago. So, yeah, the newness factor, you have, just the hype around LSU this year, even with it being a first-year coaching staff at the school. They have Clemson, right? Dabo Swinney, everyone's hanging on Dabo and whatnot. And they have the changeover on offensive coordinator. They're reverting the clock back, and they're bringing back Chad Morris again. You have a new starter with Vanini, I believe, or Venanzi, whatever his name is, new quarterback who a lot of folks are not very high on, despite him being a 4-star guy. So you have all of that. You have the stuff at Clemson, and they're falling off, and they're sort of reverting back to the mean and where they were many years ago. It's just I have to wonder, is Clemson and Dabo, are they so far gone? I mean, we can look at the spread here. I'm pretty sure the spread on this game is pretty high. It's 11.5. I mean, it was 10.5 a couple of days ago. It's pretty significant. Do you seriously believe that LSU is going to win that game by more than 10 points, by 11.5, by multiple scores? I mean, just tell yourself that 10 years ago, that Clemson, who at that point made it to the national title 10 years or year before, and then in 2016 they won it. But of course, at the time, you didn't know that because it was before the season. But again, even despite that, you just saw Clemson 10 years ago reach a national title and lose to Bama. And then your future self tells you, hey, they play, they go to LSU in a couple, 10 years, but they're going to be 11.5 dogs on the road. Yourself 10 years ago would have been like, you're on LSD, you're on drugs. There's no way that spread is 11.5. Well, here we are. And there's no one else to blame but Dabo and himself. There's no one else to blame there at Clemson but Dabo. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, they have really done, and I'm not going to say it's been complete, program malpractice, but it's pretty close. I mean, you were late on the portal. You were very, very slow to get into the NIL stuff. So, I mean, there's no one else to blame but yourself there. Again, I did not intend this to be a hate on Clemson and Dabo Swinney segment, but this game should have more attention to it, but it's not going to because the spread's 11.5 and Clemson is on a downward trajectory. And again, a lot of that is hubris. Again, word of the day, hubris. A lot of just stuff that you could have avoided if you're Clemson. And then a couple of other games here. We'll just breeze through some of these. There's one game I want to save here for very important reasons. Another neutral site here, UNC-TCU. This game should have been in Fort Worth, Texas. But it's not going to. It's going to be in Dublin, Ireland of all places. It'll be, I believe, week 0. Look, nothing wrong with Ireland. Guinness comes from there. I like Guinness as a alcoholic beverage. I don't think college football should be played in Dublin, Ireland. Never been a fan of it. It's very weird. I get it. They're following the NFL model, and that's going to continue. I know it's for the money, the dollar, but there's other reasons too why I actually think this game may not happen. Being how it's going to be in a different country. More of that probably on tomorrow's Extra Pod, if I remember, because there's a question about certain geopolitical situations going on in the real world and how it's going to affect college football. We'll touch on that tomorrow on the Extra Pod. Anyway, a little tease there, if I remember, because there was a question someone brought up there, and it was a very good one. But anyway, so yeah, even despite the fact I have doubts about this game even taking place in Dublin, Ireland, we'll see actually it happening over there. But it's as for now, it'll be happening over there, and Bill Belichick and his future that he didn't get fired last year. For whatever reason, I was very surprised by that. You have Texas Christian. You have a new starting quarterback. A lot of turnover there for Sonny Dykes and company. Several years now removed from the national title appearance. That will a lot of folks forget about, but it did happen. They earned it, contrary to popular belief. But anyway, yeah, so that game's taking place. You have Virginia and West Virginia. I believe this is a rivalry, right? I'm not mistaken. I think. I know West Virginia and Virginia Tech are. That's the coal miner rivalry? I don't think this is, but it's the battle of the Virginias, right? You have Tony Elliott and company coming off of their 10-win season. Then you have Mr. Rich Rod, second year. I believe this game is in Charlotte. I believe again, it's a non-campus location. Unfortunately, this game is. I'm pretty sure will be. Yeah, it's in Charlotte, right? Let me double check. Let me see. WVU football. I'm pretty sure this should be in Charlotte. I would imagine it is. I just need to double check here because you never know. Let's see here. Future non-conference opponents. This is in Charlotte. Yeah, it is. It is in Charlotte. Okay, I was going to say that makes sense geographically. So I was going to say this wasn't. I was pretty sure this was not a. That was not going to be a international game. We said I didn't think it was going to. Yeah, that one, and then we have Florida State, Alabama. That one's definitely very low on the list. Of course, Bama will want them revenge on Florida State after what happened last year. Florida State, it's kind of like Baylor. It's like, you know what's going to happen eventually. They didn't do it because of external reasons. So not much to say there. I would imagine. I don't even know there's even a spread here from FanDuel. Let me check. I don't think there is. No, they're not that brave to do that. Just off the top of my head, I've had to do like a hypothetical spread for this Florida State Bama game. Definitely over a touchdown for sure. Around like 15.5, probably 14.5. Yeah, probably similar to last year. Probably a little bit higher. Then the last one here, I want to bring this game to your attention. So we mentioned Notre Dame and Miami. That's one of Notre Dame's big games again because of the USC rivalry being taken away now. They have one more over game. And no, it's not Stanford. It's almost not the Navy game because that's a G5 game. They don't match up Navy physically. Nothing against the armed forces and nothing against our troops, but just from a physicality standpoint, the Naval Academy they serve the purpose to their physical attributes, I guess, are for military stuff. They're not for playing football. But Notre Dame's other big game after the USC, right, because the USC game is gone, besides Miami, is a game at BYU. And a lot of folks aren't talking about it, though. Josh Pate has. I'm talking about it, too. This game, I believe it's in, like, September, I believe. It's in the middle of the year. Very, very sneaky trap there. I'm just telling you, the line from the can't talk. I'm so excited. The betting line. Here we go. My brain just shut off there for a second. Happens once the show. It happens to everyone. Anyway, what I was trying to say there for my brain, the betting lines haven't been released yet for this game, but I would imagine BYU probably a slight dog, like 1.5, 2.5. This could be an interesting game here for sure. I mean, Notre Dame's really, I think they're only big road test of the year. I think. I know they have some ACC games, but they're ACC games. Besides the Miami, but like Miami games at home, and that you have so many advantages there, not just home field, but also weather. This one is a bit different. It's you're going to go, if you're Notre Dame, you're going to BYU. It's in the mountains, so higher altitude. Atmosphere there is like literally different. It's a road environment. Again, probably the most hostile you'll feel all year. I'm trying to think, is that Wisconsin game neutral site? Yeah, I think it is, but that game is not really very important. We're not even going to mention it because I just don't think Wisconsin will be very good this year. At least I don't think. But yeah, that game, interesting, that one for sure. So non-conference or college, but that almost went 30 minutes. Did not intend for that to happen. But yeah, non-conference there for college football. Big games there. Even Florida State Bama. I'm considering it a big game of borderline, and it could have easily been in that Wisconsin Notre Dame category where we didn't really need to talk about it. But we'll acknowledge it for sure. This doesn't include either the rivalry games that are non-con, right? Florida State, Florida, Georgia Tech. Could have added those on there, but I think those teams, particularly Florida State and Georgia Tech, probably opposite of downward trajectory. So there's that. Get some water real quick here, and we'll move right along. I guess we are sort of in the midpoint of the show. Apologies for, I guess the schedule again. It's been really weird. I mean, we had the end of last week wasn't very doable, based on some scheduling stuff. It didn't work out again because of my apartment. They're doing their spring emergency systems check, which involves them coming in here and checking on stuff, doing their mandatory things during the year. Unfortunately, we can't really do a show during the day because I don't know when they're going to show up, and among other things. So, again, it was supposed to be this week, but they moved it, thankfully. So we'll have a normal week this week. It looks like probably next week, a week after, when we'll do it. So I'll let you guys know what the schedule will be. But yeah, the schedule will not be very normal going forward. It'll be very, well, I mean, I guess like normal to a certain extent, but there will be some changes in terms of the times and stuff like that. But I'll let you guys know beforehand. But again, as we are here, again, subscribe to the channel when we do live shows and videos, and we do those individually. Sometimes we'll do those like breaking news segments. Obviously, we're not doing that today because we have an actual show. But yeah, subscribe, YouTube channel, Spotify feed, Instagram, X, Twitter. Be sure to subscribe over there, or follow over there. Same thing. Anyway, next up here, reasonable expectations. Little series we've been doing. We'll do a few more of these, and then we'll move on to the spicy predictions. I'll put out the tweet here pretty soon about that, and of course we'll add in our predictions for record projections, stuff like that. We'll do all that eventually. But reasonable expectations here. Auburn's on deck next. So we just talked about them earlier, the last segment, briefly though, but not. I wanted to save most of the stuff for this. Most of my thoughts are Auburn, right? Just generically. Now, again, we're not doing the whole schedule breakdown. We'll do that eventually. But just, outside of the schedule, just where Auburn is right now. So, of course, to hire Alex Golesh, to bring in all this talent, they lose some players for various reasons. Losing Cam Coleman, yes, that hurts from a talent standpoint. Definitely going to hit their blue chip ratio, I think, when Bud puts out the list over the summer. So definitely you're going to see that go down. There's no doubt. It's going to take a hit. Now, grant you, some of those players probably had issues behind the scenes from a character standpoint and leadership stuff. That's fine, but still from a talent standpoint, that suck. But thankfully, though, the offense you're running on Auburn, which is the veer and shoot, Baylor Brile stuff, it's not very hard to install, nor do you need super elite talent to run it, right? So again, go look at Tennessee, how they do with Josh Heupel. It's very similar. They're not. Yes, they'll occasionally get the 5-star or high 4-star recruit, but it's not necessary. Yes, it's good, especially on defense. Obviously, you definitely need that. But for this offense, you don't need like the uber talented players. Right? Even go back to Tennessee last year. They lose Joey Aguilar. Well, they don't have Joey Aguilar now, but they had him last year in his final year, as it turns out, because he's out of eligibility. But last year when they lose Nico, he goes to UCLA. He was a former 5-star guy, Elon Miava, right? When they bring in Joey Aguilar, and they can't prove, look, it doesn't matter what your star rating is. The offense will still operate, right? You don't need like the elite quarterback or the elite wide receiver to have that stuff. It's nice to have, right? Of course, right? But it's not required. It's not a prerequisite. If we're another big word there, another word of the day, that hubris. So for Auburn, even with you losing talent, the offense you're running, it doesn't take that long to install, and also you don't need talented receivers or really uber talented quarterback. Now, thankfully, you do sort of have that with Byron Brown coming in. He's a dual threat guy. He can run the football very effectively. He can also throw the ball. Despite the fact you're seeing his not leaked photo video, but video coming out of him, his throwing motion, like he really cares. Like it's not a real game. I don't think his throwing motion is actually like that. It was just an out of context clip that's floating around. But you have him. So you have basically, I think, well, it's not that I think, I know that Byron Brown coming in, he is without a doubt the best quarterback you have had there at Auburn since Bo Nix in 2021. It has been that long, almost now half a decade, which is kind of sad to think about. Now, if you want to go pure talent, probably have to go back to Jarrett Stidham or Nick Marshall, probably in 2017 and 2013, 14. So yeah, it's been a while. Like the song from Stain, right? It's been a while. So you have Byron Brown coming in. He knows the offense, obviously. He goes with Golesh last year, so that helps. You have some other parts of the offense. Some of the receivers are coming in, so that's fine to have them. Players are familiar with. But here's the thing for Auburn. The last time they made a bowl game was under Hugh Freeze. It was his first year, right? They lost. The last time Auburn won a bowl game was all the way back in the year of our Lord, 2018. That was when Jarrett Stidham, his final college game, yes, the same Jarrett Stidham who started in the AFC Championship game for the aforementioned Bo Nix. Ironically, both of those guys played at Auburn to a certain extent. Yes, that same Jarrett Stidham, his final game at Auburn was against Purdue, and that same Purdue team had the late Rondell Moore who passed away a month ago. So, yeah, that's how long ago that was, that 2018, almost a decade now. It's scary to say. So, it's been a very long time since they've won a bowl game, and they haven't done so. I mean, they've had losing season after losing season. They've made it to bowl games recently, but they've all lost them. It's been a long time. So for Auburn, obviously, you want to have some level of elevating just elevating everything, right? Under Hugh Freeze and Brian Harsin, if you really think about it, the Brian Harsin, Hugh Freeze experience, basically the same thing. The only difference was the recruiting got obviously a lot better, but if you look at from Auburn after Malzahn left to now, if you just look at the records and you just didn't know who the coach was, you would probably assume, oh, that's the same coach. But it's not. Two different coaches, but they basically felt the exact same. Even though, yes, their offenses were different and, the personalities were different. They're basically the same experience, right? Like Hugh Freeze, Brian Harsin, like basically the same thing, right? Like the actual results on offense were literally the same. Like they were both like pretty crappy. Even though you thought you were supposed to get a upgraded offensive Hugh Freeze, you did. It actually, I think it even got worse. Actually, worse than Brian Harsin, which is, again, very scary to think about. So offense for Auburn, reasonably, you should expect it to be actually a whole lot better. I think finally. So yeah, that at least for this year, offense should be a lot better. Quarterback play 1,000 times better from what you've had the past 4 years. In terms of winning games, it's gonna be tough, right? I mean, you have your SEC schedule, you have your game week 1 versus Baylor. It's gonna be tough, but if this is anything like what Josh Heupel did at Tennessee, right? If it's the same pattern, right? Ironically, both him and Golesh were both coaching at programs who were on the other side of the I-4 rivalry, UCF and South Florida. So if it is anything similar, Auburn could be a 7-win, 8-win team this year. They could, right? Again, especially with this offense and how it's run. It is, yes, it is similar to what you're seeing with Heupel, but it's a different flavor. It's not exactly the same. It's a variation of it, but still very similar. I do think if it is, again, if they're following similar trajectories here, Auburn should be, I think, in good hands offensively. They should get to a bowl game, and I think they could potentially even win it, right? I think there's opportunities for them, even during with their schedule, to get big wins. Right, they have Florida coming into town, I believe, week 3. You should be either a slight favorite or a pick 'em. I think it's very clear that it's not going to be a very decisive who's favorite over who. So that's a very crucial game. And then you have the rest of your schedule, your Georgias and your Bamas, and I think you play LSU for the first time in a couple years, and that's at home as well. There's opportunities there for sure to get huge wins, but it's not going to be easy. But I do think you'll have opportunities to see massive improvement. Even though the record may not be totally different from what you've seen recently, you should see improvement. I do think you'll finally see actual improvement, and the whole thing finally being diverted from the ditch and actually staying on the road this time instead of, constantly getting in the car crashes. It's with Hugh Freeze now, or with Hugh Freeze and before him, Brian Harsin. So, yeah, I think for Auburn, reasonable expectations. Again, offense should get better. You should win more games. Quarterback production should be a lot better. Defense, though, we'll see. I think last year's defense was very underrated. I mean, of course, before the coaching change, obviously, with the interim stuff of DJ Durkin, he, was literally wearing multiple hats, and that's partially why the defense got a lot worse, right? That's what I was trying to say. But now that he is back to the defensive coordinator role, Golesh will be running the offense. I would expect Auburn's defense to be about right around where it was last year, fairly decently reliable. Not necessarily top 10 defense, but a top 20, top 25-ish defense. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. And you can combine all that with the schedule. I think, getting into a bowl game and having a winning record would be nice for a change. And I haven't had that in a long time, but we'll see. And then finally here, as we wrap up the show, historical college football what-ifs. I've been doing these for the past about month or so now. It's a really fun exercise, sort of a very weird, trip down memory lane. It's sort of kind of a, what if this change and what do things look like? Sort of like the butterfly effect, right? You change one thing, what happened, right? That's why it's called what ifs. So we have 3 here, and then we'll wrap up the show. First one, what if Texas A&M in 2013, right? Bring up Manziel, you have Mike Evans, who's now a San Francisco 49er. Can't believe I'm actually saying that. It's coming off of Johnny winning the Heisman. They're a top 10 team to begin the year. Of course, he has his off-the-field fiascos, but larger things ready to go, right? So the season happens, and their offense is really, really good. Defense, terrible. So the what if here is, what if A&M in 2013 just had a top 15 defense, or not even that, like a top 20 defense? If that was the case, they don't lose to Auburn. I don't think they lose that game. I think they probably win that game. So they don't lose to Auburn. I think they still lose to Bama probably, but they don't lose to Auburn. They don't lose, I don't think, to LSU. Actually, yeah, they probably just lose to LSU. I'm trying to think if they lose. So they don't lose to Auburn. They don't lose to Missouri. I'm trying to remember who else did they lose to? As I know, let me see here. Texas A&M. Look this up. Probably should have known this before we start the show, but is what it is. Let's see here. A&M 2013. Okay, so they had the Bama loss, but they still lose that game. They don't lose to Auburn. I think they lose to LSU and they beat Missouri. So because of that, I think they go 10-2. The same record they had the year before, which is kind of crazy. And I think that probably puts them in a New Year's Six, or I guess at the time it was a BCS Bowl. So yeah, I mean, they probably would have improved slightly if their record, but not. I don't think they make it to the SEC championship games. I think they beat Bama. Probably not. They lose to LSU still, probably, if everything else is still the same. But yeah, Auburn, and they beat them. And how about that for Auburn that year? If they actually lost to A&M, they would make it to the national championship that year in 2013, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, so Auburn that year is different. Missouri, kind of the same thing. They lose another game. That's very different. I think it's actually South Carolina who would have went to Atlanta for the SEC championship game, and they probably would have faced Bama instead of Auburn. So yeah, I mean, if A&M it's crazy. They just had a top 15 or top 20 defense, they would have beaten other teams. They still, would have lost to Bama and LSU, but they still would have had a very good year, 10-2, and probably would have finished with 11 wins again. So yeah, that's a very interesting what if. Next one. What if Louisville in 2016 did not lose to Houston? Very fascinating here. So Louisville, of course, is Lamar Jackson's first year as a full-time starter. He wins the Heisman, but this year, a lot of folks forget, they were in the mix of the playoff, right? They were a one-loss team. They were just behind Clemson in the ACC standings. They were going to go probably to the ACC championship game. They just went out, but then they didn't. They lose to Clemson, and I believe what actually happened here. I'm going to do some research here. Pull up their schedule. I believe they lose to Clemson, and that was a very classic game too. Again, that crazy. That's 10 years ago now. Not 2018. That was a really bad year for them. 2016, yeah. So let me pull up their record here. They finished 9-4. That's crazy, 9-4. So because of the whole Clemson thing and because of the divisions, they didn't go to the ACC championship game. They were, it was Clemson and Virginia Tech, and actually they had no divisions. It actually would have been Louisville. Would have sung on, so it wouldn't matter if they lost, to Houston. But in terms of them going to New Year's Six bowl game, it was over, right? So yeah, they destroy Florida State. Get to the Clemson game, they lose, and they have a very high-scoring game. They continue to win, but they have to survive. Like at Virginia, they famously survived that game. A near upset. Same with Duke. They take care of business in the next games. They lose to Houston. Granted, it was a Thursday night game, or it was a Thursday or Friday. It was Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday. So they lose that game. Then they lose to Kentucky and they lose to LSU. So it completely falls apart. If they hadn't lost to Houston, they actually won that game. Again, if you remember, Houston that year was very, very good as well. They were at one point top 10. Could have potentially been the first team or the only team in the 14 playoff era to actually make the college football playoff because their resume was so good. Because they beat Oklahoma and they beat Louisville. And, if they haven't, it's over what if they didn't lose to the Navy, what if Houston was actually undefeated, for that game? That would have been incredible. So if everything stays the same and Houston actually, they just lose to Louisville, Louisville probably doesn't lose to Kentucky, and they probably end up going to near 6, I believe. Yeah, end up going to near 6, or maybe in the playoff. I don't know. Who knows? They were number 3 in the country. Yeah, I mean, you would have gotten 3 teams in the ACC or 2 teams in the ACC in the playoff. How about that? Yeah, I just realized that. Yeah, you would have gotten 3 teams, and it didn't happen. So, and again, a lot of folks forget that this Louisville team from Lamar wasn't necessarily, the best team ever. They were very limited. I think defensively they were very, very poor at times. They were not very consistent. Offensively, they were great, and that's one of the things that you will forget because of the fact that the defense is so bad, and they sort of flamed out there. And then of course the year after Lamar, and then they 8-4 or something like that. So yeah, Lamar's career at Louisville very, very getting a lot better. But is what it is. And actually, his overall career, I believe, Lamar's, obviously, people will know him now as the quarterback for the Ravens, but his time at Louisville, I think his overall record was actually worse than Teddy Bridgewater's. And Lamar, of course, has had a way better career than Bridgewater ever did. But in college, yeah, Bridgewater's overall record was way better. Now, granted, they're in the Big East, and the Big East had fallen into, it became a G5 conference and no longer a power conference, but and still, that's kind of crazy though. That Lamar's overall college record as a starter way worse. I think than Teddy Bridgewater's, which is kind of crazy. I think that's actually the case. So that's kind of strange. And then finally, Michigan. What if they didn't fumble the snap against Michigan State in 2015? So of course that famous game of Sean McDonough and the whole crew there. That was the ABC game on 3:30. I believe College Game Day was there for that game. And I was that the same game too, or the same day that A&M, Bama faced each other, and that was the weird multiple pick sixes? Yeah, so that was the same day, and going actually the same time as well. But I remember that. I remember this game. I remember this day very vividly. Already 10 years ago. It's crazy how far removed you are from this game now. It's kind of scary. It's nostalgia now. I just remember watching that game on the TV and just being, as a right before I started high school, just flabbergasted. Just unbelievable like that. And probably the Bama Auburn game in 2013 are probably the only times in my lifetime I've ever felt like that in sports generally. Now, there's been other moments in sports like the, what was it, the UConn, or not UConn, Villanova UNC national title in basketball. That one, I believe, Gonzaga UCLA was like that in the NCAA tournament. So there's been moments since then that, and then in terms of the NFL stuff, like the Hail Mary from the Bears and the Commanders. So there's been moments like that, but in college football, I do believe 2015 Michigan State was the last time I felt actually shocked at a result, just in terms of an actual ending. Right? I don't believe any of the games recently have felt like that. I don't think I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember here. Has there been a moment like that since? I don't think so. Yeah, not really. It isn't close. The 2021 Iron Bowl and 2022 Iron Bowl is probably the closest to that. Actually, yeah, scratch that. There has a moment since then, but yeah, I guess the only one since 2015 probably, 2021, the 2021 Iron Bowl probably. That was the Brian Harson's only Iron Bowl as the coach at Auburn. So yeah, this one again, just a crazy play. Michigan had a chance to run the clock out. They didn't. They decided to punt the football back. The guy loses the punter fumbles the snap, and they return it back with a touchdown. And actually, the guy, the player from Michigan State, I believe it's Watts, I believe, Jalen Watts Jackson. He got injured. I believe he hurt his back, and I think he went to the hospital after the game. He was out for the year. Well, folks don't remember that he actually hurt himself, and they lost him for the year. But again, that Michigan State team, though, which is really weird to think about, is that they had so many close calls. Man, they had I believe at the title season, they had the Purdue game was really close. The Rutgers game, they had to come back and win. It was before, and they were the number 2 team in the country for both those games, and they got dropped down. They had the Michigan game coming up, and this is the big rivalry game, and it's Jim Harbaugh's first big game at Michigan his first year, and it just ends like that. It's just crazy. Now, if that doesn't happen, what happens to Michigan State and Michigan? Well, Michigan probably, I don't think they make it. If everything else stays the same, they just finished 10-2 instead of 9-3. So they don't make it to Indianapolis. I think Ohio State still. Well, actually, no, they don't end up going because I think if everything else stays the same, Michigan State has only one loss. Well, actually, no, scratch that. I think Ohio State still goes, right? Even though everything else stays the same, Michigan State would have lost not once in the regular season, but twice, as they lost to Fred and lost to Nebraska in a very crazy game there. So Michigan State ends up with 2 losses. Ohio State loses to Michigan State, but because of the records in that division in the Big Ten East, Ohio State still goes. It doesn't matter. They can have 1 loss and 1 matter. So that's the butterfly effect there. Very, very odd to think about how different it would have been. So it would have been Iowa versus Ohio State instead of Michigan State going there instead, which is crazy to think about. Just that one result, you change that one result and everything else completely changes. But yeah, that's crazy. 10 years ago. It's been that long since that game. It just felt like it happened yesterday, which is kind of crazy. Like everything else in life now, just as you get older, you take a step back. And I do this once in a while. You take a step back and you go, that happened 10 years ago, or I started in grade school like 20 years ago almost. That's crazy. It's insane. But anyway, that's the show. Not enough of nostalgia here. Again, that's a different subject for a different time. But that's it for the show for today. I'm running now 15 minutes. Again, apologies for the way things are going there at the beginning of the show for Spotify and on YouTube. The technical difficulties there. But anyway, we got ourselves through it. It's all good. So rest of the week should be normal. Next week, I can't guarantee that. I'll remind you guys throughout the week when we do our shows. Again, tomorrow should be an extra pod. We'll do that in the morning. We'll have our show again on Thursday. Then we'll have another extra pod on Friday, probably. We'll at least have one. We'll have one this week. I can guarantee you that. So until then, take care. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Take care, and we'll see you guys.